All right, guys, this week we got a very special episode. We have Max ZT, the dulcimer player from House of Waters. I first saw these guys probably back in 2019. Side Hustle was doing an after party at 1904 Music Hall for a Snarky Puppy show at the Florida Theater. So before that, I went to go catch the show, and I saw this band opening up, this like jazz fusion-y kind of thing. But I noticed this dulcimer player, and I mean, such an unconventional instrument for this kind of music, and I mean, so well performed, and really not having a lot of a basis or foundation in this kind of music to help, for Max to kind of form his ability around. So he's really kind of like this tastemaker, trendsetter, path maker for this style of music with this instrument. So it's super exciting to see what these guys are doing. They got a bunch of new music coming out. They've worked with Mike Stern and a bunch of other people on this new record that they're doing coming out soon on the GroundUP label, all the Snarky guys. This conversation was so fun, super insightful. Really just enjoyed his perspective on everything and how he's been able to carve out his own path with this instrument. So I encourage you guys to check out everything he's doing with House of Waters. His solo stuff is really cool, very meditative. We get into some of the concept behind that as well. So it was really cool. So we'll go ahead and start the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and enjoy. All right, guys, this episode's brought to you by Best Buds CBD Store. If you're like me, maybe THC isn't always the right high for you, or maybe the legal status of THC has you a bit hesitant to indulge. So at Best Buds CBD Store, they have an array of CBD and Delta-8 THC products. These guys truly care about their service, so everything is meticulously sourced and prepared to deliver a top-notch product and experience. If you head to their website, you'll find all kinds of educational information regarding Delta THC and CBD. Not to mention, if you use promo code BotB, that's BOTB pod, you'll save 10% on your order. This is not a one-time deal. If you use promo code BotB pod, every time you place an order with Best Buds, it will give you 10% off. That's in perpetuity, forever. So head over to bestbudscbdstore.com and start saving on all of your CBD and Delta-8 products. Enjoy, guys. Max, thank you so much for being with us today, man. We really appreciate it.
That's a pleasure.
So is ZT short? Is it Max ZT? Is it short for something, or?
Yeah, it's a much longer name. My mother is Zbirel. My father is Teller, and so I'm Max Zbirel Teller. But MaxZbirelTeller.com is a little hard to send people to. So a little Max ZT, a little easier.
I can definitely understand that. My last name is Laplume, and though not as probably difficult, you'd be surprised of how often I have to sit there and spell it out for people. So I get it. What is that? What's your background?
My mom is Czech, so she was born in Prague, and dad is from the Bronx.
Okay, cool. So interesting. Have you gone to visit Prague at all, or spend time there? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I spent time. Not a huge amount of time, but went with family a few times, and then actually more recently, the last few trips have been playing there, which has been really wonderful. There's also an earlier form of my instrument that is in the Czech Republic, so that's like a nice little tie-in to the culture, and it's a nice coming home.
That's actually pretty cool. I'm curious about all that. Before we do that, we talked a little bit about your background. You're from Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And then when did you end up, you're in New York now. When did you end up going to New York?
Well, I went to school upstate New York in the early part of this century, in 2002. And I guess I spent a lot of time in West Africa while I was there. And then also right after coming to New York. So I moved to New York in 2006. But I kind of left pretty quickly to go to West Africa a bunch. And then I also spent a lot of time in India from 2009, 10 and 11. So although I've been in New York for almost, 15 years now, easily half of it has been abroad. So it's been an interesting understanding about what is home, and I'm using this as my base, but it's definitely a moving target.
Right. That's a good way to put it. I'm curious, were you going to West Africa and traveling to India and stuff because of music, or was it just okay? So for those who don't know, you play the dulcimer, which is a wildly untraditional, or not traditional, but unconventional instrument, especially in the genre that you're kind of existing in right now with House of Waters. How did you get involved with the dulcimer?
Sure. So the dulcimer is the hammer dulcimer is this large trapezoidal instrument with about 100 strings, give or take, and you hit it with these sticks. The history of it is that it's basically like a demechanized and manual piano. On the piano on the inside, there's a soundboard with a whole bunch of strings, and then when you hit a key on the outside, hammers hit the string on the inside. So I have the hammers and do it all manually. Originally, the instrument is likely Persian, but there are about 15 different styles around the world, including one from the Czech Republic, and then also including one from India. So we can talk more about that in a little bit. But I in the United States, it's mostly used for American folk music and Celtic music, which was my background. You can see it at Renaissance fairs. You can see it at the Irish stuff. You can see it at Scottish jam sessions, Northumbrian stuff, and then a whole lot of American folk, old timey. Some in bluegrass, but a lot more probably in old timey music. You'll see it, and that was my background for a long period of time before I got interested in music like Zeppelin, like we were talking about earlier, and Hendrix, and other product of the 90s. A lot of music from the 90s, kind of outside of the dulcimer, really got into who I was as a teenager, and then going to college, changed everything.
Yeah, I want to dive into your influences as a teenager, because I mean, it sounds like you and I have a lot of the same influences. We were talking earlier, Hendrix and Zeppelin and a lot of the 90s grunge stuff. I mean, for me, it makes sense. I'm a guitar player, so that's like, it's kind of like naturally where you start with a lot of things. How did you kind of, were you playing dulcimer already by that point? And if so, how did you kind of stay inspired to stick with that instrument given your influences of that time?
That's a good question. Short answer is I probably didn't, actually.
Okay.
When I started when I was 7, so I've been playing for 10 years, until going to college, 11 years or so. And then the last few of those years, I was still doing the instrument, but my musical influences were changing, and I was having trouble translating it. To be honest. So even by the time I got to college, it was like, yeah, this is what I do. I love it. But for me at that time, I mean, I was quite young. I saw like a ceiling. I saw like, okay, I can't get past this. And really what changed all of that was my time spent in Senegal. And that really was when I was like, oh, wow, actually, this instrument can be played completely differently. You can play one hand doing one thing, one hand doing another, as independent instruments. It can sound orchestral. It can sound like 4 harps coming on at the same time. The resonance is insane. So let's completely reinvent my style. Because before that, it was literally almost exclusively folk and Celtic, and occasional trying to write some stuff in the kind of rocky world that probably didn't work so well. Right. Looking back on it, nothing I've released, thankfully. That music is gone. It's pre-internet. It is gone.
Oh man, well, how lucky you are.
Yeah, I know. Every time I see kids putting out stuff, I'm like, and I know now that I'm getting older. I know people that have been kind of grown up in the digital age, and they're like, everything's online. I can't do anything. It's all there. Everything for my 6-year-old piano recital. It's here now. So thankfully all that stuff is gone. My parents were avid documenters, but thankfully they haven't put it all online yet. Right. But really, it was hard, and it did. It made me question a lot about whether I was going to continue with the instrument.
I can imagine, yeah.
And it might have just been an age thing and a maturity, musical maturity thing, but it was definitely exposure at minimum. I didn't have the exposure to figure out how to translate it.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And for me, and I think a lot of musicians of that age, kind of what keeps you inspired and wanting to go is having those direct influences. Well, if I'm a guitar player, this is who I love, and here's a million examples of not just success, but like wildly talented people that you can try and emulate, you know? And so
Absolutely.
were you playing a lot in your high school years, or were you kind of just taking a back seat and just kind of hanging out with friends and stuff?
I was still playing quite a bit. My first record I put out in '99, when I guess was a sophomore or something in high school. But that's all folk, traditional Celtic music. And then I started playing with bass players and drum set players and a guitarist and people outside of my standard field. But it was very, amateurish, honestly. At least my approach to how to incorporate it into this non-Irish sound, but still playing quite a bit of the Irish stuff. And then just kind of in the back of my mind being like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
It was a funny moment.
Well, I think it's on some level it's had to kind of help your creativity, I would imagine, right? Because you really had no basis, or if you did, there are not very many examples of how to utilize the instrument in more traditional Western music, or not traditional Western music, but modern Western music. So do you think,
absolutely,
do you think that like having to kind of figure out what your place was as a dulcimer player in this modern Western world added to your ability to kind of create and just be creative in general in that space?
Yeah, probably. There were people that I could definitely draw from, but they weren't that many because it's a rare instrument, no matter where it's found in the world. And also, like I'm mentioning, the time period. This was '99, 2000, '98, or before. There's no internet,
right?
There was very few ways for me to even know about it, let alone get inspired by it. So it did, allow for opportunity to create something completely unique and set like a new trend for the instrument. But I talk about I'm challenged by this as well, because I'm in many ways envious of guitar players or bassists or drummers or horn players, people that can be like, God, I want to grow. Here's 1,000 people I could look to. And then when I talk to them about that, they're like, yeah, but you can make something new. And so it's like, this is a balance, that I'm always thinking about. Like, I'm grateful for the opportunity to invent, to have to invent and not have a lot of, kind of overlap with other artists. But it's slower.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It takes more time.
Totally, man. I mean, you're carving out a new space for this instrument, and there's really not much of a path already drawn out for you. So, just naturally, like trying to figure out like the path to navigate, and that just takes more time. So, but I think that you've been experiencing, a level of success, I think, that even most musicians will never get to experience. So just in that alone, that's such a huge win for you as a person and as a musician, but for also the instrument itself.
For the instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel, like every time you succeed or whatever, your what you view as your goal constantly changes, as closer you get to it.
Totally. And that's such a fair analysis, and it's something that we all go through, because, and as somebody who's a few steps behind you as far as where I'd like to be in my music career, most people will never be able to write a record, much less record it and put it out for the world to enjoy. You've done several of them with House of Waters, and then I think you have 2 out now under your own name.
2 under my own name. One really fully solo that just came out recently. And
those are alone are just wins to count, whether or not, which they have seen. I looked at the numbers on Spotify. They have seen some pretty solid numbers, but even if they don't, just that process is a reward in itself, I think anyways.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I'm grateful that this is an unusual job. And when I talk to people that saying, oh yeah, this is all I do, I spend all my time on this, they're like, oh, it's amazing. That's so awesome that you can do that. And it's supporting you in this way. But, like we're talking about, we don't notice it while it's happening.
Right.
And so it's a lot of, it's really nice philosophical kind of lessons that happen when we kind of recognize, well, wait a minute, if my goals are constantly changing, once I kind of get close to achieving them, if not achieving them outright, maybe I'm always going to be in this level of like dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And that's fine, actually. So let's remove that. That's our baseline. Now we know that. So now we can just remove the judgment on that because it's just a matter of fact. And now, okay, now we can just be open. And that's the goal. That's where I'm trying to get to right now.
Yeah, man, totally. I 100% feel that. I was talking to somebody. I mentioned that I was in New York a few months back, and I met somebody at a bar. It was a musician as well, and we were just kind of talking back and forth about the same thing, success and what it means. And I've been lucky to have a lot of mentors in my life, musically and otherwise. And the one thing that has kind of been instilled in me that I try, it's nearly impossible, right, when we're in our own heads, but I try to like just take a step back sometimes and be like, hey, you've done X, Y, and Z. Like, we know that this isn't where you want to be, but you have to grant yourself those little wins because that's the fuel that keeps you going, because it only gets harder, right? Like, the more success that you get, like, okay, well, it's like, cool, like maybe there's label support or there's other, or you have a fan base now, but now the expectations are higher. So, and there's more interest involved, and you're the person at the end of the day that has to satisfy those interests, and it becomes more responsibility. And so it gets harder, it just gets harder. So I think you have to grant yourself those little wins, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it does get harder. I'll talk to friends like, oh yeah, but you got a label, you got management, you got the PR people coming on board, and this. It's like, yeah, now I have more bosses, basically.
Right.
I have more people that I have to have deadlines for. If it was just me, then I don't know, I'll just take my time, which would probably be worse.
Right.
But,
I was just say, yeah, it's good to have deadlines.
But it's just funny how, we perceive these certain things and recognize in the end, once you get there as well, that's like, well, actually, it's constantly hard. It's always hard. It just gets harder. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Remove that judgment, remove the ego behind it, and just try to be as present as possible and comfortable. And that's honestly, that's also the nice little byproduct of, successful musicians and amazing artists that we all appreciate and love. These people weren't, all they were trying to do was just be in that present state,
right?
And that's, I think, if we can remove all this other stuff that kind of gets in our way, all the fear, all the doubt, all of the I'm not good enoughs, these little funny little feelings that take over, or are roadblocks rather, then I think we're going to be in a lot better mental state personally, and then also like your art will just soar.
Yeah, totally, man. 100%, 100%. I want to go to your kind of first iterations of bands that you were in, because I'm genuinely curious about what the reception was to a band with a dulcimer player in it, especially in the kind of genres that you've explored,
The reception within musicians was always super welcoming.
Of course, yeah.
And super warm and curious and excited and interested, because that's the people. I mean, I'm sure there were, other musicians that would not have had that approach, but the people that I happened to find were all like this, because they were open-minded musicians, So this was like, oh, what dulcimer? All right, how does that work? Wow, this is crazy. I will say that I won't name any specific venues, but I could.
Yeah, sure.
That were like, this music doesn't belong here because we're this, this one thing, we're jazz or whatever. And so that's not jazz, that you're just a folk instrument.
Right.
That was pretty common. And next step to that, or in close proximity to that, was we don't know what to do with this.
Right.
And I think with the explosion of the internet, that's changed quite a lot, and that's kind of gone somewhat hand in hand with the songwriting and the successes that so either myself as a musician or my group has had. So it's possible that this is just a product of the times that, this is this type of response would change now that we have those decent Spotify numbers. But I also think it's just the exposure, and people recognizing, like we were talking about before with the genre, it's all coming together, for better or for worse, it's happening. And so to have a closed mind or a restricted mind, well, it's just you're not going to survive the industry anymore. It's also antithetical to what jazz or these types of musics are, where it's completely about being open.
Totally.
But it has, in the beginning, there was some, I just had to roll my eyes moments, plenty of that. Just be like, all right, you don't get it. It's okay.
Yeah, well, that's frustrating for sure. But I think now, we talk a lot on this podcast about just the oversaturation of, the industry now with Spotify and streaming across the board and YouTube and just the internet in general. What it's kind of allowed a lot of, for lack of a better word, crap to kind of permeate the industry, I think. But with that, I think kind of forces a bit of a creativity on the real artistry side, because you have to find the new angle now. So whereas, even 10 years ago, when the streaming platforms are really starting to kind of become the thing that they are today, even then there was still this idea of what works and what doesn't. And nowadays it's like, don't show me what works, because it all fucking works. Give me something different now, right? And that's kind of where, I think what you bring to the table it's why it's kind of thriving now, because we do live in this landscape where there's just so much of the same out there, and you're bringing this whole new approach to this style of music.
Yeah, I can say pretty confidently, without even any sort of ego behind it or judgment behind it, but there's not many, if not at all, groups that sound like this.
100%.
And that's just the nature of the instrumentation with the nature of the influences that are in each of the players. So that's going to, these are very unique circumstances. You don't see a lot of like American dulcimer players with an Irish background, but trained in West Africa and India, playing with a Japanese bassist who's really into music of South America. Like that's a pretty small percent. It's like it just keeps getting smaller.
Right.
Like people that are in line with that. So if uniqueness is what's going to allow a band to succeed, then I'm crossing fingers. So
yeah, man, I'm curious as to how, aside from like the industry side of it and the reception on that side, how what was kind of like the audience reaction? Because just I saw you guys open up for Snarky Puppy at the Florida Theater here a few years back. My band was doing an after party at the venue next door, actually. So
awesome.
I caught your set, and then I had to dip out before Snarky played. But I was amazed, because that was my first time seeing or even hearing you guys, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And
oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, man. I'm curious, was that kind of the audience reception from the get-go, or did you have a hard time kind of winning the audience over at first?
I had two things to say to that. One is that the instrument itself is quite like an enveloping sound. So it's quite unique in its sound, but it's not just like, oh, that's a weird, interesting sound. It's like it's very wide. And so it has this feeling, I've noticed, that it kind of like passes through somebody, and there's like an effect that it has. And I think it's just the nature of 100 strings vibrating. It's like it's going to do something,
right?
Like physics. It's something's happening. And I will say though that New York, which is quite spoiled when it comes to music, sometimes it takes some time. It took some time, to kind of to get through, because a lot of people are like, yeah, that sounds great, man. All right. And then they go next door and it's like another incredible band. And then like you go like 2 sets later and it's another incredible band. So it's like I noticed a big change when we started traveling outside of the city and then abroad. Was like, oh, wow, okay. The music's not any different. what's happening? You know, like I remember we did a tour with Snarky in the UK, and our first trip in the UK, and people like bugged out. It was amazing. Also, there's a huge tradition of the dulcimer in the UK, and so there were people that were more aware of it, you know, more than here. And then I remember we did it, and it was like we're playing in front of like 5,000-6,000 people. Everyone's like losing their minds, and then we come home and we play a show, and it's like I'm like, yeah, it was good. I'm like, I'm playing just as good here.
Yeah,
what's happening? You know,
yeah.
I think it's just a spoiled thing, you know, that New York has. We're just like there's so much talent that it makes us all kind of be like, yeah, you should be like this.
Right.
You know?
There's definitely a standard that you're being held to. But then it's also just, you know, a market of 10 plus million people. And I think that because there's a combination of just amazing musicianship, you know, that you can find on any given night of the week at multiple places. And then also just the sheer amount of, you know, the dense population. I think all of that combined, it's like, yeah, I saw this amazing band last night. I don't remember who they were. And I don't really.
And I'm going to see another one tonight.
Exactly, you know? Exactly that. So it's like, yeah, I would imagine, although, you know, New York and LA are probably the two. I mean, not probably. They are the two most valuable markets to win over in the world. But that being said, you know, because they are so valuable, it's nearly impossible to do because of the sheer amount of talent, the sheer amount of creativity, and just the sheer amount of people in one area, you know.
And new talent's coming in every day.
Every day.
I will tell you that when we used to play a lot, in the very beginning of the band, we used to busk a lot and play in the subway. And that's when we really, it was very clear to see the effect, because we were just like selling CDs like crazy. And this was when the CDs were still the main form of you know, music consumption. But we were like, it was every single time we played for a 2-3 hour set, whenever that was, it was always mobbed. But it was beautiful to see that, because it was really like straight to the people. It wasn't like, okay, these are music snobs that are coming in, or music, even in you know, people that like music. A lot of people would come up and say, oh, I don't really even like music so much, but you guys are great. I'm like, how can you even say like, I don't like music? I don't even know how to like what that even means. You know, like it's such like a foreign, it's like I can say, you know, like one type of music. All right. Well, even that is a little, I don't know.
That's weird too. But yeah.
It's like just the whole field.
Do you ever,
you know, I was like,
do you ever feel like that's like the weirdest backhanded compliment also? Because I've had somebody say that to me where they're like, I don't even really like music, but I really like your band. And it's like, oof, I don't know if I want to.
Am I not?
Yeah, am I not music? Am I not good? Or like, your opinion is, it's hard to judge, because that could be either we are so groundbreaking, which I know in my case, especially at that time, it was not the case, or we're just that bad that you didn't have to really think about it. It was just like, yeah, this could be on, I could take it or leave it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I just took the $10 for the CD and was like, thanks, dude.
Didn't think too much about it. Yeah, I'm just trying to fucking survive here, guys. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's so was House of Waters like the first band that you put together and kind of, you know, were composing for and took to this level, or were you involved in other projects before this?
I mean, something, you know, occasional in college, you know, like some stuff there. But I think once coming to the city, it really changed everything. And that was the first group that I put together when I came to the city. Maybe not immediately. Maybe there's a couple gigs here and there with some kind of, you know, ensembles here and there. But generally speaking, that was pretty early on of coming to New York. Mostly stemming from like playing in the subway and playing like restaurant gigs, you know.
Right.
And then we started just like building material, writing material, you know, adding it to the instrumentation and like, you know, arranging it. It actually it started out as a 5-piece with guitar, 2 percussion, no drum set, bass, and myself.
That's cool.
And yeah, that was a fun a moment with the group. We did a record, our first record, an EP called Elsewhere, which is very hard to find. I think I have like 2 copies left.
No shit.
and I think it is streaming. It's streaming, so you can check it out. But it's very different because it's two percussion, no drum set, a very different kind of sound with that. But the same bass player, Moto Fukushima. And so he and I have been playing together since 2007.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Good on you guys to be able to keep that relationship going, bro.
Yeah,
that's gotta be. You guys must really work at it.
Yeah, we really have figured out a really beautiful dynamic and relationship, and my wife calls him my first wife.
Yeah.
So it's a funny little joke. But we were able to really musically we didn't step on each other's toes. A very little overlap because of bass and dulcimer. I mean, he does have a high range because he's playing 6-string, but I'm obviously higher. And so we've been able to he taught me a lot about comping and how to play behind, so we could be able to switch off and do a lot of this, which I think is what's really fun about the group. After the 5-piece, it eventually became a trio with percussion, bass, myself. And then it became drum set, bass, and myself.
Gotcha.
And that's where it's at now. And it's, I guess, like third or fourth iteration.
So I wanted to comment on that, actually, the comping and how you support his soloing. It's really it's beautiful because it's hard to comp a bass player without sounding like you're losing so much of that bottom end and that groove. And I think you do a great job of kind of, filling the space, obviously, but kind of building melodies without that support his soloing without stepping on his toes at all, and that's something that I noticed that I really appreciated. Is that something that you guys have worked on together, like just in practice, or do you think that it's like a natural thing that you just know what that space feels like?
No, it's definitely taken a lot of work to get there, especially now that Moto has brought more of his melodic lead, and also his songwriting to the group. He's writing a lot of music now for the group, which is awesome. But it did take, the instrument has so much sound and a lot of ringing tones, and if you have any sort of chromaticism, it's gonna have dissonance. And also, I don't want to pigeonhole him in his solo and being like, no, dude, D major. I want to be able to, even if I move on from D major, that F sharp is still ringing.
Right.
Totally. And so I have to make sure to be very choosy about how to do it, what octave to do it in, what rhythm, how much to play, how much to overplay, how much to underplay. Do I go high when he goes high, or do I go low when he goes high? Do I add speed, or am I very sparse but loud so the resonance lasts? Do I mute? Do I pluck?
Right.
What all these different timbre approaches. But that took. I mean, I still feel like that's what. I give it a solid B. Maybe a B plus. I feel good about it. I feel really good, especially on this new record. We could talk a bit about, but the new record. I'm really happy with the comping. But it's a constant column that I want to be addressing in my playing. When I'm thinking about when I'm on stage playing, that is one of 4 or 5 things that I'm constantly like, okay, don't mess this up.
Right.
I want to be there. I want to actually complement, and add to without subtracting from what Moto's doing.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah, man. Well, and lucky for you, back to what we were talking about earlier, there's really no basis other than what you're establishing right now as far as this style of music goes on a general consumption level, right? So it's totally. Like you can kind of set the tone, no pun intended, but also establish the vocabulary that's happening there. I think so. That's super cool. But I also think as a musician who's paying attention to those things, tonally and otherwise, it doesn't sound amateur or like you're just trying to figure it out. It sounds like you've already established the thing. And I'm stoked to hear the new record and how you've even taken it further. I'm curious, how much are you trying to anticipate Moto?
Moto, M-O-T-O.
Moto. Okay. How much are you trying to anticipate what Moto's doing, harmonically and otherwise, to try and establish what you're going to do behind him?
That's a great question. It comes down to just listening,
right?
And like very active listening, which is obviously much bigger than just music,
right?
And I think we could also talk about it in a bit. But my studies in India really pushed me to this more philosophical thought process about active listening versus passive listening in terms of relationships and conversations.
Yes.
And improvisation, which is what we're doing right now. We're improvising a language together. But when I'm listening to people that I'm collaborating with, and especially Moto, where I've who I've had such a history with, I know a lot of what he's going to do.
Exactly.
Or at least approach wise, right? I know, like, okay, yeah, maybe here he's going to do that thing. Here he's going to do this thing. Obviously, that's not 100%. But I think what I try to do is, as much as I can, be an extension of his soloing.
Yeah, I love that.
So that means sometimes that, like, how dare I even try to touch that? I mean, it's like, oh no, he's saying something. I'm not trying to interrupt him right now, or even add to.
Right.
How many times do you have conversations with people, and then you're totally on the same page and you're vibing and you're kind of finishing each other's sentences, and that has value, but sometimes that could be frustrating because the person can't say what they want to say in their words.
Right.
And so I have to respect his own words, and try to add to it in a way that still allows him to say what he needs to say. And that could be as minimal as, like, downbeats every 16 measures, or, drumming on one note, or doing crazy high runs quietly behind,
right, man.
There's no wrong answer. It's just you just have to listen. You have to hear it. You have to hear him and try to see, like, if he was speaking, what is he saying? And am I stopping that? Am I stopping him from saying something?
Right.
Hard. Well, especially if you like what you do, like, oh, this is going to sound great. It's like, well,
that's I talk about this all the time especially with younger musicians that are coming up, about just, like, intuition as a musician, and how this translates just in life in general. Just having good intuition and instinct is what allows you, or, man, it's even hard to say good intuition, just trusting your instinct and intuition, right?
Yeah.
That allows you to take those risks that, may lead to failure, but also may lead to, like, these ultimate, these huge payoffs. And I think that musically you have to think about things in that same kind of way, which is why it's so important for musicians to be listening, not just while they're playing, but listening to music when they're not playing, and just really, not passively listening, but actively listening and trying to understand why this is working in this context, whether it be, grunge rock of the 90s or avant-garde jazz, whatever it is, just trying to understand the communication that's happening. And then, so that way when you go into a situation, especially in improv, but writing and composing too, but especially improv, where all you really have is your ear and your instinct, right? And the more that you can really kind of internalize while you're listening in your own time, it translates into the communication that you're having when you are playing, I think, right?
Yeah. And, it's been a little tricky because a lot of my background musically has been like a lot of, like, overplaying. In the Irish scene, I'm like, the role of the instrument is this melodic lead. My studies with choral players in Senegal, it's like they're doing a huge amount of stuff is happening. Bass lines, harmonies, melodies, improvisations, all happening at the same time, constant, and it's fast and intricate. And then even in India, the tradition of the instrument is solo with percussion. Generally speaking, obviously there's little things here and there that change, but at least in the modern version of the instrument, it is in the Indian classical form in Hindustani music. It's your melodic instrument and then your percussion instrument. Sometimes you'll have what's called a jugalbandi, and you'll have a secondary harmonic instrument in. But generally speaking, it's just this duo. And so my background is all eyes on me, and overplaying is fine.
Right.
And it took me, I mean, it's still, I'm always, I gotta tell you, it's still a major part of what I want to do with this music is to really take a step back of that and just try to be intuitive, have the fluency, of course, in your craft, but eventually get to a place where, especially with a long relationship, but even without that, on the record, there's a drummer my first time really playing together was on this record, and he, and I still had to try to listen like so intently so that when he would hit that accent, I'd know that I got it. He's going to try to do this thing here. I got it. And I hit the line and I hit the downbeat with you.
Right.
And those moments, like, boom, instantly the band feels great. And then they kind of fuel itself.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's one of the biggest challenges in probably in anybody's musical kind of relationship with other people.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah, exactly, man. I think it's beyond, or aside from just the language of music itself, it is that communication that happens interpersonally, with playing and otherwise with the people that we're playing with. I think the fluency in the language of music that you're talking about, having that fluency allows you to develop a stronger instinct and intuition on things, which is why you can walk into a situation with a drummer that you've never played with before really and record a record and take risks, and then you both land winding up in the same spot because there is that fluency, of course, but that fluency also implies the instinct, right? So it's like you can really just kind of, without having a verbal dialogue, get to the same place musically because you just know instinctively what's going to happen, And
I can say my solos are generally pretty weird. There a lot of it is based off of like Senegalese djembe and Senegalese kora, and so there's a lot of like over the bar stuff, like a tremendous amount of that.
Yeah, I love it. It's so fun to listen to.
And it's fun. It's like because you just take a step back and be like, wait a minute, it's not just math here. Like, let me just kind of communicate. But I was curious after listening to all these mixes and stuff. I'm like, okay, thank God we brought this amazing drummer in, and he's able to, even without a lot of history, he's hearing where I fit, even if I'm playing super out, and also the being locked with the bass player is always is pretty key.
Yeah.
And so and conversely, I have to be locked with the bass player when the drummer is doing the solo, or I have to be locked with the drummer when the bassist is doing the solo. And so we're always kind of thinking in these like little duos,
right.
Constantly.
As a trio. That's so funny. Yeah, it's so true though. Yeah.
I think about it as like we're kind of like three percussion instruments. I mean, it's all rhythm section, right? If I'm piano,
right,
then it would make sense that the melodic instrument also, with moto being a melodic instrument, has a relationship. Bass and drums, the most common and most important relationship in music. And then I'm a percussionist, basically.
Right.
So drums and myself have to have our own little relationship. So it's this series, I think, that is pretty fun, and that's how we've written a lot of stuff into our music that way.
I love it, man. It really translates. I'm curious about this new record. Tell me a little bit about it, and how it might differ from the stuff you've put out previously.
Quite dramatically. We got Antonio Sanchez is playing drums.
Okay.
He's incredible. He's probably one of the best players I've ever played with. Just remarkable and a great person. Just one of the best out there. And myself and Moto. That's our core. And we have Mike Stern on guitar coming in for one song.
Yes.
And the singer Priya Darshini, who was on one of our earlier records. I think it was the first GroundUP release, a song called Hamza.
Okay.
She's the singer on that, and she came back and did a reimagining of a song that we did before, but with lyrics this time.
Oh, super cool.
Or using Indian solfege, Indian sargam, and it's pretty special.
Oh man, I can't wait.
So that's that. But we did a certain set amount of compositions, and then more and more over this past couple of years, we've been getting really into just like solo freeform improvisation. And that's, I think, a lot stemming from the isolation that, we've all went through the past 3 years or so.
Right.
This kind of separation. We don't even want separations. And we were kind of recognizing that a composition was a separator.
Interesting.
Like, wait a minute. I'm sitting at home writing all this stuff. What does it have to do with the audience? It has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with the moment that it's played. Mind you, we write in moments where we can be expressive in the moment, but in the end, there's a part of it is a little bit of a separator. It's just like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Like with that person, who doesn't know anything about jazz, and they show up to a thing, they're like, oh, I don't know how to listen to it. Right. And we don't want any of that stuff, So what we decided was to pragmatically also to cleanse our palate, but even just conceptually, we were going to do as many as we could, really, improvisations. Freeform, top to bottom, no direction whatsoever, just start.
Wow.
And we did like 14 of them. Probably 9 or 10 are pretty kick-ass, and like 5 are like, all right. Like those are great. So we're going to put as many as we can fit on the record with the rest of our compositions. But maybe we'll get about 3 or 4 in, and then maybe do another record next year or something with the remaining ones, or sprinkle them out as singles. We can decide as time goes,
That's so smart too. Just, if there's one, not to get too inside baseball on this, but like if there's one thing as an artist to be like aware of, just backlogging material and content and stuff, because holy shit, what a whirlwind it can be when you're trying to play catch up. It's like you got all this shit to do, and then you got to produce all this content and write new material, all to meet these deadlines. Like, well, if I got it backlogged, then I'm not so under the gun, and I can focus on being creative,
Yeah, we did 6. In the end, we came out with 20 pieces, and it's like that could be 3 records, no question.
That's amazing, man. That's so cool.
Easy. And Antonio is just unbelievable. It's what he brings to the table is unlike any other type of playing that I've heard. And he's like kind of like that in general. So maybe his playing on ours is not as unique as his playing on others, but it's incredible. He's Pat Metheny's drummer, and
that's where I know that name from. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
He did the Birdman movie. He's that guy.
No shit.
And he has an amazing group called Antonio Sanchez and Bad Hombre. They're just awesome. We just saw them in New York 2 nights ago. They crush. That's with Big Yuki on keys, Lex Adler on bass, Tana Alexa the singer singing, and then Antonio on drums.
Damn, man.
So that band crushes.
They have like a residency there, or is it just kind of like they're just gigging around?
They did a decent amount of tours. They've played at GroundUP Fest this past year, last year. I think it was not the one in February, but the one prior. So okay. I guess 2022.
22, right? Yeah, I forget it's 23 already.
Yeah, so it happened.
Yeah,
but he's amazing. And then coupled with Mike and then with Priya, it's really it's something special. I think it's really, really unique, and I haven't heard a lot of music like it.
Yeah, man. I'm planning on being back and forth from here in New York a lot this year, just trying to maybe, I don't know, make a move or something. I'd establish some roots somewhere. I don't know. I fell in love with New York when I was there, and I just love the creativity and the art that's just there. It was inspiring, to say the least. But I want to talk more about the record, because you guys had Mike Stern on, and we were talking a little bit before. This is like somebody that I've grown to really love, and he's become like one of my biggest influences as a guitar player. How many songs is he playing on? What's his contribution to the whole thing?
He's just on one song as a special guest.
Okay.
So Antonio did the record, Priya's on one song, and Mike is on one song.
Okay, cool. And how did you guys land on Mike Stern?
So Moto does a lot of work with Mike Stern and his band. So he does a lot of the New York shows, but also a decent amount of the touring. And him and Laney have become very close to both Moto and myself. Definitely way more with Moto. They do so much together. They had a composers club for a long time where they would just meet every Friday and bring a new song. And
that's so cool. I love that.
They have a deep relationship, and so that made a lot of sense. And Mike is so funny because he's like, the first time we met, at least the first time I met, I think maybe even the band too, the first time we all met him, we were playing at 55 Bar, which is this incredible jazz club in New York City that just closed last year after 108 years.
No shit, which is, man.
Atrocious that it had to close, raising the rent type of stuff, which is awful.
Yeah.
But we were playing like the early set opening up for Mike. They always have 2 sets. And Mike just like walked in. He's like, "Wow, man, this is far out, man." And he just like threw all of his stuff down and just like ran over to the stage. We're just like, it's such like he's such, that is his whole vibe, and just like the sweetest, kindest dude. And when Moto approached him for the record, he's like, "Yeah, of course, man." And then we figured out like how to do it. And we're doing a lot of doubling. So we're trying to create a sound that is like quite unique. We're almost, it's like because the dulcimer is like we're putting a little bit under, so these kind of go together, so it feels like a punchier guitar or something that has more strike, like a whole new instrument. We were trying to go for.
I love that.
Make it something new, but at the same time, like we had mentioned before, as soon as you hear that first note, we know it's Mike. He's really has a ability to. He's created his own sound. It's remarkable.
Yeah, man. I'm really curious about how that interplay works with you guys, because obviously Mike Stern, he's got this very airy kind of tone, and like to me, his phrasing and his control of the bends that he does and stuff is just it's so masterful. How does that interplay work with you guys? Because is he doing a lot of that bending stuff, or is he kind of like adjusting to the dulcimer? Because you can't really. I mean, I might be wrong, but you can't really bend, right?
I can do it a bit, so I have some on the record, but it's generally speaking, it's a fixed pitched instrument.
Right. So how are you guys kind of working that interplay out to kind of create this sound? I'm just curious as to the headspace that you're in there,
So his solo, he could definitely be him. So I'm not obviously doubling any of that. I could be comping, but just trying to be as minimal as possible as well, because it's already bass comping. I'm trying to think about stuff like a piano, sprinkling notes in here and there, and then also all the gaps that are between a melody, that he can kind of like do a fill into or out of. That's fully on him. But for the melody itself, where it is, I'm fixed pitch behind him, I think as long as it's mixed properly, it can be him gliding from one to the other, or kind of doing a phrase. I'm doing this, but doing a phrase, that kind of moves or bends from one note to another. If I can maybe highlight those notes without the bend, but just like underneath, like and hit the markers, like instead of going from the third to the fourth to the second, like you might go do da. If I can go da oh,
I see. Yeah,
that might be a way to allow him to still be himself while fitting into a group that he wouldn't necessarily be doing. But he has such a history with piano.
Yeah,
that he knows how to do that. I mean, we didn't have to say anything.
I'll bet.
Honestly, he knew exactly where to go, and he took freedoms, and we've got it mixed really beautifully. And I think now it sounds like this new instrument where there's like these little drops of strike that happen.
Oh man,
it's pretty cool.
I'm so excited to hear this album, man. It's really like I just the way that you're talking about it right now, I can already kind of grasp the concept. I'm so stoked to hear how it's all come together. I'm curious. There's 2 things I want to ask, but they're kind of separate. They're not really related questions, but so I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. One, collaborating with people that are skilled enough, comfortable enough to take a risk, even though it's not their baby, their project, right? versus people that you kind of have to, put the training wheels on and walk through the whole thing. I'm curious about that relationship, and if you guys have scenarios, no names obviously, just about where you do have to kind of walk them through the process versus people that are willing to kind of again use their intuition and instinct to take that risk. What's kind of there's got to be like an up and down side to both, and I'm just curious as to your experience there and how it's kind of gone wrong or worked out in both scenarios.
We've definitely had myself, I mean, within the band and even outside in another contexts, because of the lack of exposure of how this instrument sounds and is played and the role that it plays or can play, I've had challenges for sure, where it's like I'll be doing some sort of double time thing, and that means that the person that's playing with me feels like that they should also speed up. Right. I'm like, no. I'm playing on top, but I can't say that on the middle of the stage,
Right.
So, like, no, calm down. I can't, it's not going to happen. Right. So there have been plenty of challenges of things like that with certain players that operate in this higher, level, I guess. I can judge that. Yeah. A higher level. They're already doing that active listening. They're already asking the exact same questions that I'm trying to ask myself when I'm playing, even with somebody I played with for 15 years. Like, how do I play with moto?
Right.
Like, I've been asking myself that for 15 years. And I think you have to always be asking that. Like, I don't want to stop asking that, and I'm sure he has the exact same thing with me, guaranteed. So I think that if you're trying to, if you're a musician out there that are finding yourself having to, or feeling like that you need to be walked through something, the way to really do it is something like we talked about before, like taking a step back and being like, okay, where does this actually fit? Let me write it down. This person is this octave and that range. This person is this octave and that range.
Right.
And I am seeing overlap here, so I have to be careful when I am in my upper register, because that means that in their lower register, there's going to be, toes being stepped on. And and that's just harmonically. What about rhythmically? So I think it's just a constant, it's homework. You just gotta, the only real way to get around that, from somebody who's also probably been on the other side of it,
sure,
as well, for other musicians, they're like, oh, you gotta hold this guy's hand, through it. I think it has to be presentness. It has to be a constant state of just of curiosity and just open ears, like the whole time. That's really it.
That's such a good way to describe it, because that curiosity, that's the key right there. Is always, I feel like I was listening to another podcast recently where they were talking about just relationships in general, and the thing that always keeps them fresh, whether it's a marriage of 30 years or it's a musical relationship or otherwise, there has to be just a genuine curiosity there of the other person, and that's what keeps it interesting. You know what I mean? So and in the context, outside, we'll keep it in the context of music because that's what this is. Being fluent, like we talked about, and being willing to take those risks and trust your intuition. I think when you see that quality in a musician, I think it genuinely makes you curious as a musician who tries to exemplify that as well. So it's and when you see that, you want to that curiosity creates this kind of mutual respect for each other where you're never settled, right? It's always kind of a challenge, and that's what's important, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, Mike, when he came into 55 Bar that day and like dropped his stuff and like screamed, because it's like such a Mike thing. Funny. It's the best. I mean, he's the best. That would not have happened if he didn't have that curiosity, that childlike curiosity, that constant excitement to never be like stuck on some sort of pedestal that he could easily be on. This is Mike Stern we're talking about.
Of course.
No problem. Like, yeah, he owns all the accolades, 100%. But he doesn't feel that way, I mean, he'll probably at the end of a solo was like, "Was that okay? Was that okay?" You know, and you're like,
so was that okay? Was that
you're like, "What are you saying?"
It's the greatest thing I've ever heard in my
Best
life.
thing I've ever heard. Exactly. But because he has that, lack of judgment and just constant openness, including critique, it allows him to, or it inspires me to pursue that same path, and that's personally on a human level, but also musically, absolutely. When I'm sitting there and I look over at another human being, that I care about. Ideally, you're playing with people you care about.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully,
yeah.
I'm sure plenty of people have played with people they don't care about.
Oh, yeah.
But you're watching this other person give some sort of expression. I mean, ideally it's something that is inspiring to you. It makes you trust. We were talking about curiosity, but trust is just as important in that, where it's like, I can make a mistake right now, and it's not gonna be a train wreck.
Right.
Like you guys got it. I can try some crazy thing, and I missed it. I didn't land on the downbeat. Oops, I landed on the upbeat. Guys, come to me, hurry! And that's happened. I mean, too many times to count. Thousands of times.
Yeah.
You know it. We all, every single person knows that.
I just had this happen at a
you'll
jam.
lose the clave, you lose the one.
Yeah, I just had it at a jam recently, where I was up there playing with some. They were all great musicians in their own right, but there was a part I was like taking a solo, and I was playing over the bar line, and the drummer didn't lose the time, but he lost his place in the form. So he resolved it like maybe like measure 2 or measure 3
a couple beats later or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then my solo wasn't resolving quite yet, so it created this kind of this disconnect in the resolution of the whole thing. Which for me up there, I'm like, well, fuck, I just the impact that I was trying to communicate to the crowd is lost now. However, we're still up here, we're still making it work. We're fixing. There's no train wreck, basically, right? And that's that trust, especially when you're with musicians that you don't know.
And I mean, it's when you're playing in front of an audience, it's one thing for sure, but we also have to remember, like, why are we doing what we do? Why are you playing with the people you play with? Like, it's for the exploration.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, like, I've had those moments where I look over and I'm like, wow, oops,
right.
Right. That's great. Thank you. Sorry. And it's like it's not like, if you're playing with the right type of people, they're not going to be, upset about it. Obviously you want to be accurate. Obviously you want, or intent, check the boxes off that you're trying to check off. But if you don't, what happens? And that's, and is that actually bad?
Right.
Like we were talking about before, the Hendrix quote. What's the exact quote?
I don't know the exact quote, but he said, but it was along the lines of like, he's starting to hear people copy his mistakes.
Mistakes are, I mean, I don't know how many times I've made mistakes and then been like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Turn that into a new thing. How many times? I mean, scores.
Yeah. I mean, probably every day of your life in some capacity, whether it be music or otherwise, right? It's like just every day.
Yeah. So let's lose the judgment of the oops moments, but it does take fluency. It does take, it's not just, do whatever the hell you want. No, you have to know what you're doing.
Well, yeah, because I think, there's a conversation again that I was having with somebody recently is about realizing when something is happening as a lapse in what's generally characteristic of the person, or if this is something that's just part of, or do you just suck? Or did you just fuck up, right? And that's the difference. If we're exploring something, or we're taking risks, and we mess up, the grace of goodwill has to be there on the people that you're playing with, because hopefully they recognize that was a lapse in your performance, not the exception to the rule, not the rule, right? So, yeah,
that's just the what's the word? It's just like the execution.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you didn't execute in that one way.
but you're killing it the rest
So
of the
what?
time. So you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Exactly.
And so many times I've had that where I'll like end something on the upbeat or something like that, or accidentally add a measure or subtract a measure or something, and then we're like, oh, that's actually really. Let's just do that. So now all of a sudden we're in 7, just for one measure, and then we're back to 4 or whatever.
Right.
And it's like that's looking at a chart. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's
like
a nightmare.
What a jerk
Yeah.
to have done this to somebody. But like where it was born from is this beautiful mistake,
Totally, man.
That actually I think if we can still have that curiosity and that openness to be like, no, there's no wrong answers. Like actually, then I mean that's the whole point of what we're doing.
Totally.
We're not trying to be technicians here.
Right.
Totally. Trying to be creators.
Exactly, man. Exactly. I'm super big into studio work. I do a lot of session work on the side, and I've released several albums out under different bands that I've been in, and I'm such a fan of the process. That being said, it is arduous and daunting and meticulous, and the only reward is the end result. Like there's really the fun moments can be few and far in between when the nitty-gritty work is getting done. So I'm curious, how tired of you of your music already on this record? And I'm curious about, listening back to mixes, and like, are you getting, outside perspective from other musicians that you trust? Are you just listening to yourself and going back to the engineer with notes, or what's that process for you guys?
Well, we for this record, our management is Guy Eckstein. He's Billy Eckstein's son. Billy Eckstein's just like the legendary jazz singer. So he's been in the business for everything. I just saw yesterday. He just showed me. He's on. Our manager Guy is playing drums on Soul Train with Quincy.
No shit.
And it's just like I gotta find that video. We have to post that somewhere.
Yeah.
So he's been in the business for a very, very long time, and is just has an incredible ear. So he's been the kind of objective voice, as opposed to us being like, well, actually, I think I like take 2 more than take. Like, we're kind of thinking along those lines,
right?
And or hey, bump that one thing over, where he's kind of like thinking big picture, group sound. So he's been really helpful for that. Plus, our mixing engineer, Ian Pei, he's one of the founders of Blue Man. So he's been involved in the percussion world forever. He also did my solo record, and he's the one who did our last House of Waters record, the last one, the EP on GroundUP.
Gotcha.
So he has a really deep understanding of the dulcimer now, especially after the solo record. And we could talk a bit more about that maybe. But the process was a lot of, because the instrument is so dynamic, and Antonio is such a dynamic player, and Moto is such a dynamic player, we have to be very careful about how we craft like the image. So a lot of little volume edits here and there to make sure that a subtlety isn't lost. Because I'm hearing it direct on, but these microphones, as good as they might be, put that in there, and it's the same frequency as a cymbal.
Right.
Good luck.
Right.
So it's been a decent amount of that. But in terms of big picture, having Guy involved, having Ian involved in that aspect of it, and then of course having the other musicians that are on the record, having Mike and having Priya give their input, not just for their songs that they're on, but also for the other songs, and how do they feel like it, does it sound too much of a departure when all of a sudden there's a new instrument involved? Does that need to be addressed? Does that mean that the high ends on the track previous need to kind of mellow out a little bit, so that when Mike comes in with his first note, it's not like jarring, so little group sound things that 99.9% of people don't hear or even care about, but it's something that for some reason we were big dorks about.
Well, I mean, I think that when there's that reality of just existing in the studio, where you're in this room, that's soundproofed, and there's no windows, and you can be in there for 12 hours that day working and just scrutinizing 2 seconds of a song for an hour or 2 hours, trying to make sure it's all there. And so you become obsessed with that. And of course, to somebody else, they don't notice or they don't care, but everything that you're doing has an intention. Every note that you're playing, and you want to make sure that that intention is being served. So of course you give it that attention to detail. And the average listener, they might not know that they care, but they do, because when they listen to the end result, that attention to detail is what's giving them that feeling, right? And so I think it's important, and it's cool that you guys are nerding out over that as much as you are about the performance as well, because I think that as well as the performance can be, if it's not properly engineered and produced, the performance can be massively understated.
Totally. It won't be anywhere as effective. And it's also tricky, right? Because if you're in a studio, you're doing so many takes often. Some of our songs are on a click, but not all of them.
Oh boy.
None of the improvs.
Yeah, right. Right.
And we didn't want them because there's sometimes we have tempo changes that are pretty drastic. We didn't want to stop and deal with a new click or mark in a click, because what if that, solo, actually we want to do one more cycle of or whatever. So we wanted to keep it pretty open. So that's hard with editing and stuff like that, obviously. Of
course.
But what we tried to do is not get too bogged down and not lose perspective by obsessing too much.
Yeah.
So easy. So what we did, and I recommend this to anybody, is just play for 3 minutes, just improvise for 3 minutes, a completely different thing. So we would do that between takes.
Oh, really?
Not always, not between every single take, but we would literally be doing 2 takes of one. And I'm like, it doesn't really feel like, let's do another. Actually, you know what? Improv. And we do an improv thing for 4 minutes, and then we come back and do take 3.
Oh, I've never. It's like a palate cleanser.
Totally. It really was just like, okay. And now you can take a breath of fresh air. You can have a little bit new perspective. You can recognize that all that little stuff that you're obsessing about and that one thing doesn't matter.
Right.
Now let's be musical.
Right.
And you can still obsess. Believe me, there's plenty of obsession moments that still happens.
Of course.
But it was nice to be able to have this moment of let's just dial this back and try to be musical here.
Totally, man.
And really just try to communicate.
That's awesome. I'm going to try that next time I'm working in the studio with a band. I've never thought about that before. A palate cleanser is very cool.
Totally. I mean, think about if you're trying to learn a part for something and it's driving you crazy, you have to put down your instrument and walk away for a little bit, no?
Yeah, totally. 100%.
And even when you come back, I found myself do that and then be like, okay. And then it is kind of, I noodle around for a little bit. And then it's like, all right, let me get back to learning this thing.
Right.
So it's it's not unheard of. This is something we do, pretty regularly.
Totally.
In general.
That makes so much sense, man. I love it. I do want to touch on your solo stuff as well before we wrap up, because I was giving it all. I've been listening to it all just to kind of prepare for this interview, and so this is different than what you do with House of Waters. It's literally just you and the dulcimer. And it seems more meditative music, I guess, is the way that I would describe it. What was the intention there, and what do you want to do with this music?
Well, yeah, I'll give you a bunch of different things about it. So during the beginning of the pandemic, it was really rough. A lot of people were getting sick. A lot of people were dying. My wife's from India, so India got rocked pretty hard.
Yeah.
And the U.S. New York was a nightmare.
Yeah.
24/7 sirens. I'm shocked I was able to get a record recorded. It was a home studio. Everything was done at home.
That's wild.
And somehow, I would have takes where or sections where I hear sirens. I just like, well, there goes that. You ever
think about leaving them in just as a creative choice?
I might have thought about that. I don't remember now, but it's very possible. I could have been like, no, man, I am losing my mind. The intensity is crazy.
Yeah.
But what I started recognizing was the only way I could really kind of be there for somebody was just to kind of give one of my biggest assets, which was my music. So I started sending just like 5 to 15 minute improvs to people, as either they were in hospice or in the hospital or dying or getting better, or the family members of those people, um, and just saying like, you know, I I recognize what you're going through, and there's nothing I can do to really help, but not to minimize what you're going through. Here's something that I here's like the closest thing I can do for a gift, to help in this way, if possible. And I did this maybe about 15, 20 times, and started seeing like it was actually really powerful for a lot of people. Some people, no response, and they were still too caught up in the trauma of what they're going through.
Of course, yeah.
But others have become very close since then because of this type of kind of outreach. And I recognized like, okay, I want to actually make a record of this. I want to do like a whole album. And so I improvised maybe 3 to 4 hours a day every day for about 15 days, just straight. Like press record and play for 3 to 4 hours.
Wow.
And then press stop. And then I listened back to all of it and chose my favorite contiguous hour. And so what you're hearing is one take all the way through, fully improvised. I had to cut some stuff for Spotify, to make sure like, okay, it's not a 52-minute song. It's, this 7-minute songs or whatever.
Right.
And
so that's
kind of that's where it came from.
So that's all one take that you just split up into different songs.
Into 7 different songs, yeah.
That's beautiful, man. I love, first off, the intention behind it is so cool. Is I think a lot of us as people that, write and create and stuff like that, whatever capacity that might be, felt at a loss during that time. Just not knowing what the outlet was, especially since the live performance was gone. But then there's a lot of people that were just losing relatives and experiencing things in their own way, especially not having a creative outlet where there was nowhere for this stuff to go, right? So
people were going crazy.
Yeah, so it's amazing that you had
artists. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just think it's so cool that you had that perspective to empathize and sympathize with people and to use what you knew how to use to contribute to people's experience.
Yeah, some form of healing. And then musically, I can listen back to some of the older ones. Like it started out like much more flashy and much more like technically proficient. And I had this crazy image where I was just like envisioning the music being played in the hospital as someone was passing and their family was around. And I was like, I don't think I want any of that experience between this person who's passing and the person who's witnessing the passing to be distracted by the music that's playing in the background.
Right.
Like I can't distract you from this moment. I can't take away any of your attention from what you're doing right now because you're not going to get that back. Like that is the priority. And similarly, like with comping, how do I complement that? How do I make your experience and your issue that you're going through the priority? And it turns out a lot of it is playing a lot less.
Right.
And just like literally letting, like, I had struggled, man, this like letting space go by that I'm like, I should have come in 20 seconds ago, and it's like, it's still like going, or I should have moved on to a new idea 5 minutes ago, but I'm still here on the same space because I don't want this to be interesting, really. I want this to be complementary. I want this to be a part of a being that you're in, as opposed to being like a look at me moment. That's very tricky. I struggled with that throughout the process of this, like really trying to find the right, patience, I guess, and stillness to operate on that way.
Well, yeah, and aside from the from obviously just having the outlet to create and then doing it for that purpose, there's this huge exercise and restraint there for you as well. So it's hard, but man, it's, you know, it's important for musicians to do that and to put themselves through that kind of experience. And I notice myself a lot, like going to, like, you know, a lot of the times where I get to be creative or at jam sessions around town. So I'll do that and I'll show up with the mindset of, I just want to support tonight. I don't want to lead, because, you know, if you're here and you've seen me play around town, you know that I'm a lead guitar player and I do what I do. But what I want to do right now is practice being a support player. So I'll show up to a jam and people will try and like get me to solo or lead a tune. I'm just like, no, let me just support you guys here tonight. And that's, for me, an exercise in just being a rhythm player and also getting creative with playing rhythmically. You know, guys like Corey Wong and obviously, you know, part of the Snarky crew, Mark Lettieri, and guys like that are just aside from being
masters at it.
Yeah, man. I mean, aside from being masterful lead players and with their own voices, and while also authentically doing justice to every genre that they want, whatever genre they want, they're also just phenomenal support guitar players and musicians in general. That I think it, you know, recognizing that aspect of it from guys that are so, you know, just amazing as lead players as well, I think is important and something to take away for every musician.
Totally. And I mean, if you've been a lead player, then you also know how it feels to be supported.
Totally, man.
And it's like what an awesome feeling to give to somebody.
Yeah.
To show up and just like make them flourish. Like, man, like you're going to get called back for that gig.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
That feels good.
And also,
you know, to give that is amazing.
Yeah, man. And also to know what it's like to not be supported and being stepped on the whole time, where you're just like, bro, don't be that guy. Right. Totally. Just, you know, my wife is Priya. She's the singer on the record, and she's an Indian classical trained a singer. And something that she said recently kind of stuck with me. And she's like, saying that music starts and ends with stillness. It starts and ends with silence. Like, here we go. We're about to start the song. Right.
Silence.
Right.
We finish the song. Silence. And so that has just as much right to be there as a 16th note.
100%.
You know? And so to use silence and stillness as a note, I mean, that's when we listen to Schofield's a master of that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like no joke. You know, there are tons of players like this. Mark Lettieri is a master of that.
Yeah.
Being able to just like hit a space and let the weight of that be more impactful. I mean, it's remarkable. The true players, true masters of their craft can pull that off. But again, it's quite tricky, you know.
It's tricky, man. You know, it is tricky. But you know, the science is written into the music. We have notation for it. It's literally what creates phrasing, and it's the space in between that allows the notes that you're playing to actually have an effect. So it's important.
Any sort of impact.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's important, man.
Another cool thing I just want to mention, as we're on the solo thing, is tomorrow I'm going to be announcing, actually, and it's coming out on the 19th. There's a remix of one of the songs on the record that's coming out, done by Sun Lux, who's this incredible group. They're the ones who did the music for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, okay. Super cool.
That movie. And they did this song with David Byrne, and that also got those nominations. And they're an incredible band. You should check them out in general. They're like so dope. And then, so they got word of the record and then did a remix for one of the tracks.
Oh man, congratulations. That's so cool.
It's pretty dope. It's being announced tomorrow on the 6th, but it'll come out on the 19th, and it'll be all over my socials and, you know, websites, etc.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna link all that stuff in the description, so whenever people hear this, I think this comes out in like 2 weeks. So it'll line up actually perfect. Yeah. So we'll link all that stuff in the description and make sure that people know where to find it, man. congratulations again. That's amazing. And everything that you guys have been doing, man, honestly, I know what it's like from the perspective of being in it and not fully, appreciating where you're at, but from somebody who, on the outside, just doing the thing is an accomplishment in itself, and you've done a lot. So it's awesome, man. Especially carving your own way with this instrument and the music. It's all just so inspirational, man. I love what you do, and I can't wait to see more of it.
Oh, that's awesome. And if there's other dulcimer players that are out there or people that want to learn the instrument, I'd love to help people on their path. I build them. I've been making them as well.
Oh, really?
Since like 2007. With a great builder. I've been apprenticing with David Lindsay down in Oklahoma. He's just this incredible builder and is very responsible for my sound in a lot of ways because he built the instrument
right.
That I first started playing on. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey on that aspect as well. So if there are other players or other people out there that are interested, I'd love to help somebody on their path.
Awesome.
This instrument has to keep going,
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Anton, if you want to, we can do bottom line news. I looked at some stuff in the email.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Let's do some bottom line news real quick. Yeah.
A couple quick things, just some. I've kind of got some categories over here. So celebrities. First thing, Roger Waters is fighting against German concert cancellations. Have you guys heard anything about this?
No, but it's not surprising.
I hadn't heard about this. He got a bunch of concerts in Germany that got canceled because he's being accused of being an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting because I've always imagined his work being very much speaking against that type of government.
Yeah, very
obviously,
no?
But it's full of that kind of imagery. So I think they're just upset because it sounds like on stage. Frankfurt's council has highlighted that. Here, I'll send this to you, Anton. Frankfurt's council has highlighted Waters' historical use of the Star of David branded onto a prop pig as part of his show. And I was like, yeah, I guess I could understand that. But apparently it also has, it insisted that the pig represented the evil of errant government and also featured the crucifix, the crescent and the star, the hammer and the sickle, the Shell Oil logo, the McDonald's sign,
nice.
a dollar sign, and a Mercedes logo.
Yeah.
So, I think that's just kind of, to me, that's just kind of funny. But I do think it's very interesting that it would be the Germans that would be extremely serious about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I thought he was getting grief because there was like code cancellations and he was upset about that. That's what I thought I knew about. I don't know about this thing.
Yeah, apparently it's they're like we don't like that that imagery is not okay here in Germany.
Fair.
Yeah, well, it's also, it's not surprising though either because again, not to get too political or whatever, I'm not taking a stance here, but Roger Waters has been very outspoken being anti-Israel he calls it pro-Palestine, whatever it is. He's very outspoken about this. And yes, if you listen to the conversations that he has and the way that he speaks, if you take the sound bites out, then yes, you can start to draw conclusions that may not actually be real. However, in a long form conversation, you listen to him talk it out. His real problem is just with people that are in power taking advantage of people that aren't. And the perspective, you can argue multiple perspectives, and they're all valid to an extent. Obviously the West is very pro-Israel, so when he comes out and says things that seem to be against that, you have people that will call him whatever they want to call him. And then especially in Germany where you can't even, being a Nazi is, and being a Nazi is just straight out illegal in Germany. So I can see why that would happen there for sure.
Yep. So that was a real quick one. Roger Waters probably anti-Semitic.
You heard it here first, guys.
The next one, I didn't really know anything. What do you guys know about Jim Gordon, the former drummer for Eric Clapton? Do you guys know anything about him?
No.
I didn't either. I just saw this one and I kind of like glazed over the headline and I just saw Jim Gordon, drummer for Eric Clapton. And then I just saw, dead at 77. And I'm like, oh, very sad. We'll just we'll mention that. But then I read it further and there's a middle part to the headline that I missed. And it was Jim Gordon, drummer for Eric Clapton and convicted murderer, dies at 77, which I had no idea about. And I just kind of want to take you on this journey that I went for. Jim Gordon, he was a drummer for Eric Clapton and George Harrison, but also was convicted of murdering his mother in 1983.
What?
Yeah. So apparently in 1983, apparently he had a long history of mental illness and substance abuse, obviously. Was not in the 70s, not treated right at all.
Right.
Here's another. Gordon played on countless rock songs throughout the 1960s and 70s, including hits from Beach Boys, George Harrison, Steely Dan, Carly Simon, John Lennon, Gordon Lightfoot, Sonny and Cher, Nancy Sinatra, Tom Waits, Tom Petty, Frank Zappa, Alice Cooper, The Byrds. Crazy resume. Yeah. And then it says, after weeks of threatening behavior, Gordon bludgeoned and stabbed his 72-year-old mother to death on June 3rd, 1983.
God, she must have been a real bitch.
Claiming that voices told him to do so.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was sent to prison. Apparently, he was up for parole multiple times and never got it. I think he died in an incarceration.
Died in prison?
Yeah, I think it was. It seemed like, let's see, he died of natural causes, California Medical Facility in Vacaville after a lengthy incarceration and lifelong battle with mental illness. So I don't know if he had been released, but it sounds like from this article he didn't get parole. So it sounds like he's in prison.
That's wild.
Wild.
That happened with Phil Spector. There was another drummer or a producer back in the day
that
Phil Spector
killed people.
Was not. Oh yeah, he killed somebody.
I think he killed his whole family.
Oh my God!
And it was like,
I think it was his wife.
I
can look that up.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember he had the courthouse photo of him. As his hair is just like this.
Yeah.
Insane.
I just Googled him, and this guy looks like a murderer.
Yeah,
like
him,
he looks very, very.
He's also
creepy.
responsible for like all of the sound of the 70s.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's pretty. Turns out you could be a jerk.
Collection, murder, and imprisonment. Yeah, this guy totally murdered people.
Genius does not come without its cost, guys. What are you gonna do?
I guess so.
and
I'll give up genius any day if those were the costs, though.
100%.
I'm all good.
100%.
I'll just go garden or something. I'll figure it out.
It also begs the question. I've thought about this before, and this is kind of slightly not off topic, but kind of off music. The idea of like schizophrenia not necessarily being something that is a disorder, more of like a hyper awareness. You know what I mean? Because you've got people like John Nash, who's this amazing mathematician, and people that are just brilliant, that just exist on this plane that most of us can't tap into. So you have to wonder what else is coming through that.
There's a reason why they say you're well adjusted. Like you're not.
Right.
You're adjusting yourself, and that's what's making you fit.
Right.
Whereas it's very possible without that adjustment, you could be noticing voices, understanding math, being a better whatever, having a higher memory. But it's that process of, I think, subtraction, that's really keeping you sane. There's a great Radio Lab, that wonderful podcast on NPR, and they have a episode about limits, and they have a story about a guy who could remember, I'm talking everything, and like every single thing that he ever had seen, he remembers it. He could recite, I think one of the things that he can recite Dante's Inferno from scratch in Latin. He doesn't even speak Latin, but he just knows the sounds, you name it, he's that guy. And he went nuts. He went absolutely crazy.
What a burden, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
If you think about a dog and you see every other dog that he's ever seen in his entire life flashes in his face right then.
Wow.
Yeah, you're gonna go crazy.
Yeah.
You have to subtract. You have to adjust.
It's also that going back to like that instinct and intuition, right? It's like that principle, unfortunately for those that are tapped into that level of existence or that level of consciousness, that principle is even more important then, because you have to know when you're taking in too much, right? And try to mitigate that or like you're saying, limit, subtract. You have to know when that's
adjust.
Adjust, exactly. And that's what makes it kind of like, a disorder, I guess, is not being able to adjust or discern what's just you creating versus what's you taking in something truly important or productive, right?
Yeah. I've got some more. That was a good one. I've got another one that's short, and this one just kind of hit me recently because like I had heard people say that like, oh, the music quality on Spotify is not good, not as good as Apple Music, and I was like, sure, but like, I didn't realize how bad it was. And then like I work for you don't know this, I work for a production company, and I was sent out to Pompano with this huge sound system, and I had to tune it. And normally I tune it off my phone, but I had given let someone use my little dongle at a different show, and they never gave it back to me. So I was like, whatever, I've just got to play something through this PA to make sure it sounds good. And I had my laptop, and I had some songs downloaded on Spotify, and I hook it up to the thing, and it sounds bad. And at first I'm just like, okay, I missed this PA. Like, I need to, I just set this thing up wrong. I need to fix it. And then like the front of house guy comes in and he starts playing through it, and it sounds awesome, exactly how it should. And literally the next day I used iTunes instead of Spotify, and it was 14 times better, and I could literally A/B it. But this article is when is Spotify hi-fi coming exactly? Apparently Spotify a while ago was contemplating actually doing hi-fi, but apparently it was going to be a premium service, like an extra thing that you would have to pay for, even though Apple Music and Amazon are offering it. That's just like part of their baseline thing is just dope audio.
Yeah.
So this question is, when is it coming? And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about it. We've been working on it, but I don't know. We'll do it, at some point, what it's going to look like. But it sounds like Spotify is just trying to chase the video TikTok hype still. So
yeah.
Well, yeah, as we've talked about again a lot on the show, Spotify's limitation is the only service that they offer is streaming, whereas their competitors like YouTube and Apple and Amazon are multifaceted networks, and they can take a hit on the streaming side in order to get more customers to their platforms. Whereas Spotify is struggling to compete because they offer no other service. So it makes
that's interesting.
Yeah, because they're also saying they're like, we're trying to find a way to do it in a way that is cost effective.
Exactly.
It would be quite a change for them to have to do that.
Yeah, and Deezer
they can't take the hit. Yeah.
Yeah, or if they're gonna implement it, it's gonna take more time because right now they're readjusting their business model for something else. So it's probably not a huge priority because they see revenue coming in from this potential TikTok model, whatever they're going to try and do. So that's probably what they're excited about, and the hi-fi music is going to have to wait. Because also, it's like, Deezer, I think, was the first streaming platform to really introduce high definition or like music listening that the other platforms weren't necessarily doing. So if you wanted like real like top quality streaming music, Deezer was where you did it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now I guess the other platforms are offering that service, where I think Deezer's going to have trouble competing there for sure. But it's
they got Europe though. I think Deezer has a pretty good lock on Europe.
It's also
they got that go for them, which is nice.
I think they're also like a subsidiary company. So like Deezer is not the thing. It's under a broader umbrella. I forget what the parent company is there. But again, it's just all like, it's so complicated and convoluted, but as a musician and as an artist that kind of has to, navigate these platforms to make a living, I think it's imperative that we have a working understanding of that side of things so we can try and figure out how to make it work,
I have friends that like graduated Berkeley with like music business degrees or whatever, and they're just like, this is useless.
Yeah, right.
And because that's changed every year, so it's important to keep tabs on it and always be kind of up to date.
Yeah.
As much as you can, because that's like a way that you're, sending your music to people. That's how you are impacting your people.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, ideally, you don't let that influence the art that you make.
Yeah.
I'm not out here making 115-second clips. You're like, got the TikTok thing on lock. Like, I'm not trying to do that.
Right. Right.
But I guess you could. But
well, I just I think authenticity is ultimately what sells, right? And there's people that have utilized, like Scary Pockets is doing a great job utilizing these platforms without compromising the integrity of what they're doing. So, but they've also done it in a way where like you don't look at Scary Pockets and say, oh, there's that fucking cheesy social media personality. It's like Scary Pockets isn't being inauthentic. They're just taking clips of their very original covers and they're just posting them, and it's
right.
and it's working. So I think
absolutely
finding your voice on those platforms is important because it gets people to hear it and see it, but also staying true to what it is that you do. Don't be a cheesy personality if that's not who you are, right?
Unless you are a cheesy personality,
right? If that's,
and at that point, go get it.
Go for it. Totally. That's I'm very big on that. Like if that's who you are, do whatever you gotta do to sell your shit. If you're a cheesy personality, but people like that, right? If you're not and you try to be that, the consumer is not dumb. Like they know when you're being inauthentic, and that's important to keep note of. So
yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I've got one more category, and it's we can kind of combine two articles in one. And at this point, I don't know if you've been listening to a lot of the previous episodes, but a lot of things that we end up talking about on Bottom of the Bill News is AI. So this is AI Watch. Welcome to AI Watch podcast. But so we've been talking about AI, and we've always been kind of like, well, what are the kind of rules going to be? It seems like, we're like, there's a lot of things to figure it out, and people are starting to try to figure things out. So we've got two things. The first one is the USCO offers new guidance on AI copyright registration, saying that copyright can protect only material that is product of human creativity, which I think is interesting. So they've finally tried to set something down.
How does that defined though?
Right.
Yeah,
Great question.
I think there's still a lot of room for some vagueness there. Going on.
If you create if you create something, if you create an AI platform or an AI whatever, like a ChatGPT thing, does that mean that what ChatGPT does is not human creation anymore?
So this is saying copyright protection exists to help incentivize and reward human creativity, skill, labor, and judgment, not output solely created and generated by machines.
So here's where this is there was a guy.
Machine was made by a person.
Right. So here's the argument, right? The engineers in this space are not in agreement, typical in science, right? So you can't agree on something. But like second, third, the argument is whether or not, if you create ChatGPT, then whatever creative output is coming from that, the engineer is responsible for. That what they're saying now, where the argument is like, okay, we're talking about second or third generation AI that's created by another. That let's say ChatGPT creates an AI, which it's done, and then that AI creates something. The argument now becomes: does the person who created ChatGPT own that intellectual property? And that's where the argument's starting to happen amongst the engineers. Where does the AI start and the human begin? I guess.
So we offer in here later. It offers a little more concrete. It says if a work's traditional elements of authorships were produced by a machine, the work lacks human authorship, and the office will not register it. For example, when an AI technology receives solely a prompt from a human and produces complex written, visual, or musical works in response, the traditional elements of authorship are determined and executed by the technology, not the human user, which I think is interesting.
Okay, so they defined that a little better, but to bring it to the music world, what happens I think that's similar. Like if you're sampling somebody, let's say you take a sample and you put that into a song, does that person does the original sample, do they get writing credit? Are they?
So, well, they get something, right? Because you still have to register that. They still get, like, you still acknowledge that you use that.
And I think cost,
I think the distinction they're trying to make here is that saying we will not support machines. Like, if it's getting to a point where it's just like, well, did a human really do this? I think that's kind of the line that they're saying, no. At that point, if it's you just gave it a little bit and it did a lot, then that is a machine's work, and copyright is meant for humans and not machines.
Here we go with the fucking Terminator.
Even then, I mean, already, like, but even, because even then, even your sampling argument kind of fits within that, because they're still trying to protect humans, because, like, Beastie Boys,
still human.
Yeah, Paul's Boutique by Beastie Boys could not have been made now. Like, you could not make that album now because of the amount of sampling that happened in it, and they just did it and just kind of got away with it. And it was after that they really started to crack down on that copyright stuff. Right. So, like, but even then, it's just to protect other artists. So I think they're not acknowledging the machines. Yeah.
This is the start. The robots are going to cite this moment.
Yes.
For why they.
Exactly.
Why they turned against us.
Well, because there is a real argument, there's a real discussion happening amongst the engineers of this technology that, there's AI that is showing signs of true sentience. So, and then in that case, do you grant them rights? Because if they're capable of emotions and creation and all the things that we are capable of, are they entitled to be protected? And, again, the question then becomes, what are emotions and sentience? Is it just a collection of data, that's producing output or input and response and output response, right? So it's like it all gets very complicated.
It's the Chinese room thought experiment. The idea that it's like you are in a room and you have a book in front of you that's basically like how to read Chinese, like, or it's like a Chinese translator, and someone gives you a bunch of things. You look in the book and it says, like, if you see these, put this, and then you write it down and send it out. You have no idea how to read Chinese. It's not translating it for you. It's just telling you, when you get these characters, do these characters. Do you know Chinese? Like, do you know Chinese? Can you know Chinese? Can you learn Chinese based off of that?
Right.
Like,
yeah. That's an interesting point. Yeah.
But,
there's a great Star Trek Next Generation episode called Measure of a Man. I think it's in the second season, where the debate is whether Data, the android robot-looking guy, is property of Starfleet or not.
Oh, interesting. And, that's a good one. That's the same kind of thing.
It's amazing. It's an incredible episode. It's on Netflix. You should check it out. It's called Measure of a Man. I think it's season 2, like episode 6 or something in the middle. Maybe it's season 1. I think it's season 2. It's an incredible thing, talking about, an army of data. Like, what's that going to do? Is that like a whole class of people now? Like, are those or a class of, like, semi-sentient, people? Or not people or beings? Are they actual properties? Are we talking about slavery now?
Right.
Right. Someday we'll have to address it.
Yeah.
Continuing on with AI, giving more protection to humans, but also more fodder for the machines to want to overthrow us eventually at some point in time. Major labels, the Recording Academy, and 30+ organizations issue a list of AI principles. So the Recording Academy, RIAA, and a bunch of other companies, it lists a bunch of them. Let me get to the list. BMI, ASCAP, all the major hitters, from globally, have come together and actually created a list. If I can find it, there it is, of the of guidelines that they are going to try to implement to support support AI being used, but in a way that is still, like, creative and is not kind of like, so that it doesn't overpower. It says there's 7. So I'm going to read them off here in a second. It says they issue a list of principles to promote the advancement of AI while respecting human creativity and copyright law.
I don't like that language.
So let's get to the list. Let's get to the list.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
Rule number 1 for the machines. Technology has long empowered human expression, and AI will be no different. So I guess that's just saying we want it to be a tool for people to use, you know. Number 2, human created works will continue to play an essential role in our lives. These are very just kind of vague and esoteric. 3, use of copyrighted works and use of voices and likenesses of professional performers requires authorization, licensing, and compliance with all relevant state and federal laws. So you can't deep fake someone, is I guess what they're saying. Governments should not create new copyright or other IP exemptions that allow AI developers to exploit creators without permission or compensation. That seems just kind of like building off the last one. You know, you can't, you know, deep fake people. Copyright should only protect the unique value of human intellectual creativity, kind of, you know, side chaining off what we were just talking about. Trustworthiness.
Watch out, the robots are coming.
Watch out.
100%.
Trustworthiness and transparency are essential to the success of AI and protection of creators. That's kind of like, and this is says,
good luck.
Complete record keeping of copyright works, performances, and likenesses, including the way in which they were used to develop and train any AI system, is essential.
Right, but
Good fucking luck.
so the question is like if AI has access, ends up, you know, having access to all this data, and they get to a point where they can actually manipulate it, then this poses a real problem to the laws that are in place, because the idea is that that the AI becomes smarter than us, especially if it becomes, you know, like sentient. So it's like, you know, with all the access to data and information, at what point can they start manipulating it? Right.
Look what happens. I mean, you know, look what happens now. Like with you know, the history is written by those that conquer it.
Right.
You know, it's
Exactly.
just a matter of time. It's so easy to change like truth. You know, we've been seeing that a lot, right? They're like, all of a sudden we're talking about different types of truths. And it's like, when did this become a debatable topic of what truth is? You know, and so it's very easy to see that in a couple of years or a couple of generations, you know, all of a sudden this whole thing world over, yep, this whole thing didn't exist, or a thing did exist, or this is actually how it was, or these people weren't so bad when they were really awful. And like this type of can easily be manipulated, like no question.
Yeah, I'd be curious about getting somebody on this podcast. We do like we also get like we've had agents and managers and people on like the business side just to kind of talk about things. I'd be curious to get like somebody that works on the publishing side or even on the label side of it to talk about how they're prepping for this integration of AI into the world of music and art in general, because you know this is going to be, you know, movies and everything. You know, we're seeing it now even in the fine arts where there's these beautiful pictures, not even just like paintings, but like there's photos of scenarios that never actually happened, right? And it's just like it's other than just a few little glitches like in hands and whatever. There's really no discernible traits there that would make you think that it wasn't real, right? So so it's just interesting. I'm just curious. I'd be curious as to what the industry is doing to prepare for this integration, you know.
They probably have no idea what to do.
Yeah,
you know, same way I have no idea what to do. You know, I don't know. How many years will it take before an AI written song wins a Grammy?
Right. I
bet they'll have their own. Eventually they'll just create like the AI Grammy.
Hopefully.
Like who wins the AI Grammy?
I really hope.
Hopefully.
I really hope that they do create a separate category, because if we end up having to compete, there's just no way that we're gonna be able to keep up with that output. You know, like an artist can't produce. You know, the
output's not going to happen.
Yeah, a sane artist can't produce that much quality music in that amount of time that the AI will be able to generate it. You know, so I don't know.
Just like,
yeah,
it's like that. Yeah,
it's scary. You know.
Yeah, hooked up to quantum computing, it turns out 4 symphonies every 14 seconds.
Right.
Like, you know, like something.
Exactly.
Hopefully Dulcimer doesn't make it into that the AI. That maybe we'll stay under the radar long enough. Still have a job.
Yeah, you still.
I don't know, man. I've heard some really good MIDI samples, man. I've heard some really good MIDI samples. I think we're all in trouble. We're all in trouble.
Those Casio Dulcimer. I have a bunch of sample packs out though, so check those out.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, nice little
Dope.
shameless
That's
plug
actually
there. I like
really
it.
cool. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
That's all I got for bottom line news.
Thank
you for joining AI Watch as well.
No problem.
That was I like the AI watch. I like
AI
that.
watch. It seems like every week we end up talking about AI at some like. There's always an article where we talk about AI. So like, it's a new segment. AI watch.
I love it. I love it. Those were good, Gene. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
That was awesome. All right, so some unpopular opinions. Gene, you got anything for us today?
Yeah, I can do one. We'll see if it strikes a chord anywhere. I think, and especially like in the field that I work in live sound and stuff like that, analog audio, especially in like consoles and stuff like that, is just overrated. And like even getting into the recording side is like starting to get there too for me. I will not say. I will say this. I don't necessarily means that I hate it. I do enjoy the sound of analog, but like from a practicality standpoint, every time we bring out like we have this one Midas console, the Midas Heritage H3K. It's literally like 8 feet long and weighs like 700 pounds, and it takes like 6 guys to like just get flipped over and tipped up. Every time we bring that thing out, I'm just like, God damn it. Like I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
iPad's not good enough.
Right.
But even then, like even our nicer, bigger consoles that are digital, they're still heavy and stuff like that. But they're just like that you can do. It's so, like everything that you can get so close to the sound of those consoles, like so close. Is it exactly the same? No, I will not just say that it is exactly the same. But it's so close, and especially the SXLs. Like I can use Waves plugins live. Like what I mean. I could get a lot of that analog type vibe live. So it's like I just think it's overrated. I think it's overrated at this point. Digital is very, very good. I like it. It's heavy.
I'm with you, man. I don't know enough about it on the technical side to say one way or the other. But on the practicality side, I would imagine that it's way more convenient to go digital. And then also, I am not a fan of the stuck in your ways kind of thinking. I put out a post a while back just asking musicians like what their favorite plugins are for guitars and even for like mastering stuff or whatever. And one person just commented fucking Marshall stack 412s and just cranked that, just dimed out. I'm like, I live in an apartment, and that's antiquated technology.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I will. Not gonna happen.
Yeah,
a 3-story walk up. It's like it's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's not practical for everybody. But I will acknowledge that I did. I was at the Parlor for a little while in New Orleans as an intern. I don't even know if it still exists anymore. But excellent studio, had Neve console, analog everything. He had a real plate and stuff like that. When you're trying to achieve a sound, like if you're trying to get a specific sound, and that sound is much older, if you do exactly what they did, you're gonna get there. Like that was the thing about being there, is like that is the one thing that was nice, is that like with that console and all that stuff, as soon as you put faders up, it sounded like you would expect it to sound, like from a record straight out of that time period from like the 70s and the 80s, because it was all just gear from that time. So like without having to do anything, it was already there. So like that is incredibly nice. But at the same time, before that session, we had to spend like 2 hours like opening up every single module of the console, like the EQ, the aux sends, going through it. There was a couple that were bad, and one guy literally took 2 of these modules out and opened them up and unscrewed them, and it's like this one had a bad thing here and this one had a bad thing at a different spot, and he was literally unsoldering capacitors and like switching them between components to make one EQ that works, so we could have like one full channel. It's not
effective.
No, like they require so much maintenance and upkeep, and it's like it's crazy.
It's also like when you're asking for advice like that as a musician, like coming a lot of the old heads, no offense, I respect everybody that came before and that did their thing. It set the tone for me and as a reason why I'm playing music today. That being said, when you come to me with an answer like that, just fucking Marshall stack fucking cranked up to 10, blah blah. Like, first off, there's just a dismissal of curiosity there, right? It's like the fact that I could even be entertaining anything else. Number two, just the assumption that I'm trying to do what was done 30 or 40 years ago is also just like, understand why I'm asking what I'm asking. And if you're not willing to entertain it, then just don't come to me with an opinion. Then don't be a douchebag. Basically, you know what I mean. And the old heads have kind of a just stuck in their ways mentality. I understand not feeling like you can keep up or not wanting to adapt because you think that you guys figured it out.
Also, there's so much; it's constant, right? There's so much stuff happening every single year, every single day.
Yeah.
In this field, and the technology is just increasing in quality so quickly that
Totally.
I'm behind. Everybody's behind. Nobody's on top of it really.
Right.
I will say this about analog, that analog playback, as in like vinyl, I substantially noticed the difference. I know you're talking about Spotify and the compared to iTunes, but I noticed the difference between even FLAC and vinyl, and it's a different. I don't know. I'll prefer vinyl all day over any sort of digital version, even CD.
So in your opinion, do you think vinyl is of a higher fidelity? Do you think it sounds better, or like do you just enjoy the warmth in the tone of it? Like more specifically, like not necessarily that it's better, but it gives a quality that you enjoy.
Couple things. Definitely gives a quality. That's for sure. That I think is hard to replicate outside of that. And to be honest, a lot of it comes from, most importantly, comes from the concept of curation. When you have every single song available to you in the entire known universe in the history of all recorded music, you have nothing. When you have a collection of stuff that you've been like, no, this record and that record and this one and these choices that I've made.
Right.
I think that the impact of the performance is just that much higher.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a part of why I think it sounds better. Is that because it's just more impactful, or is it because it actually sounds better? And I don't know, but I do know I'm definitely impacted differently.
I fully agree with that second statement. Growing up, because like I am definitely like a person of the digital age. Like, do you know what I mean? When I started listening to music, it was really even kind of like I barely really used CDs, and I was really just onto MP3s, and iPods and stuff like that. And at that time, I didn't have money, and I'd get gift cards and I'd get singles and stuff like that, and I'd listen to like one song, by someone just on repeat, because I didn't want to spend a whole money on an album. And then when I got older and I got interested in vinyl from an audio standpoint, because I learned how it worked and it fascinated me, and I started listening to vinyl, that's when I actually started listening to albums like by artists, because it was
beautiful.
Yeah, the experience of listening to a vinyl is much different, like because it's a physical thing. There's the artwork is also a big enjoyment for me. Any sort of inserts, like one of the first records I got was a Star Wars, the original Star Wars soundtrack, and
nice.
It had all and the guy at the shop too, also the process of buying it, like the guy at the shop was very nice to me, and he was like, he took me to this back room where he had just shelves and shelves of records that like weren't out on the floor, and he had a whole section of Star Wars, and he's like, feel free to go through all of the ones of that album and find like the best piece of every one, like the best outer shell, the best this insert, the best that insert, the best first disc. And I did create the thing, and he charged me same price as what was out on the floor.
Wow.
And it was awesome, and it's like all of that little stuff, and then just actually having to listen to it front to back, discovering so much more music by artists than I ever would have dreamed of.
So then, isn't that the fidelity better?
I think so. Maybe in a very
Concept
philosophical, that is a fidelity of
right?
life. Yeah. But
I perceive that audio differently, and maybe that's enough.
Yeah, because you've bought into the full experience, right? It's becoming an immersive experience now, and that's the whole thing,
As opposed to just like put it on in the background while you cook, wow,
exactly, yeah.
Something like boom, and I'm listening to the planets by Holst, and it's just like yes, like that feels different than just putting on chill mix,
Totally,
100%, yeah,
totally.
It's a lot more intentional.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a commitment there for sure. Good one, Gene. I like that.
Thanks.
What you got, Max? You got anything for us?
I don't like the Doors.
You don't like the Doors?
Don't like the Doors.
You know,
I am indifferent towards the Doors. I am aware that they exist,
Yeah.
but that's about as far as it goes.
okay, there's elements of this that I do agree with because I don't think Jim Morrison was that much of a genius. I think like he was different. He was definitely creative. I'm not a huge Doors fan. I would rather like there's a couple songs that I do really enjoy, and especially in my younger days where I would, indulge in psychedelics and go on journeys with some of their music. Now I listen back to it and I find a lot of it pretty underwhelming. But I don't know if I
Totally.
I don't know.
Boring.
Yeah.
Out of tune.
Yeah.
It's out of time.
Yeah.
Nothing's, I'm not feeling anything. Yeah, I get it. You did the Riders of the, like, all right, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
The end is a
But,
phenomenal song. It's also like in 5 and it's kind of like an interesting,
Yeah.
Okay.
That song's not bad. You're right.
That's a good
song.
That's
like one. That's one.
Yeah. And there's also
why are they these legends?
It's also like we can sit here and like call out their hits and talk about what made an impact on society and their importance on a cultural level, I guess. But then listen to their records and tell me that you still love them because there's a lot of shit to sift through before you find those pop gems.
Those little gems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there you have it.
Yeah. So what Gene, you're indifferent. I definitely get that too.
Yeah, I've never consciously listened to the Doors. Like, there's a lot of music that exists that I know I'm aware of, but like until I actually sit down and try to listen to it, like there's like I can't form a strong opinion about the Doors because like I could maybe name maybe 2 songs. Like you would have to play stuff for me. Like it's fine. I know that they're there.
Yeah,
no need. You don't even need to. Explore.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's gonna save me so much time. Thank you. Check that one off the list.
Yeah, I can. There's stuff that I do like by them. I don't think I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm totally off the bandwagon with them, but yeah, I get the indifference and certainly why you don't like them. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, so my unpopular opinion this week is I'm going to go back to an older one because there's a lot of stuff that I've said that I don't think got full awareness that it should have gotten.
It didn't hit right.
Didn't hit
time,
right.
And yeah, he's going to go again.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a reason, but please continue. I'm ready.
No, so yeah. I think that being a musician doesn't really entitle you to compensation.
I'll
let you guys sit with that for a second.
Yeah, I need to. Okay.
Conceptually, I understand the sentiment because it has so little to do with what music is about.
Right.
It's like completely opposite.
Exactly.
Of what art is about. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to worry about compensation. I can just live in a place and I could have electricity and I could have, quality of life to a standard that I would like that doesn't cost me anything. And I can just live on the earth like a wonderful living being. But because we live in this remarkable hyper-capitalist society.
Remarkable is a terrific word.
I will remark on it. Yeah, man, pay me.
Yeah.
But I understand where you're coming from because artistically, it shouldn't even be involved,
So
it should just be creative.
I want some clarification on this because I guess in my opinion is being anything, just the act of being that, like being able to do it, like does not, I think, entitle you to money. But I think once you cross that point where you are providing a service, essentially doing a sort of performance. And if it is considered of a good quality, then yes, I do think you are entitled to compensation.
Absolutely.
Because I think once it gets into the point, like if we use capitalist terms, as soon as we start providing a service, like then we are required for, then compensation is required.
The arts are essential kind of movement that happened when we were all talking about essential workers, and we all saw how we were all losing our minds without having, art involved in our lives.
Right.
Thankfully, Netflix came through and we had Spotify and stuff. But like, if you remove that, you would see the need for it, the human need for it.
Right.
So at that point, isn't that just as much compensatable as healthcare or food?
Yes. So let me dissect this a little bit for you guys because
like hold on, are you talking like food stamps but for like art? Like
no,
like
guys.
No, I'm saying food is an essential item of survival just as much as art is.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you on that, and I want to dissect this a little bit because I am not the the idealist guy. Okay, I'm very much a capitalist. I think that we should all be able to charge, what we think our value is based on what we're able to contribute. Blah blah blah, all that fun stuff. What I'm saying is that as an artist, I believe that before you can. This is also like nuanced and context based, right? So if we're talking about a musician in the sense, like if I'm playing at a bar, okay, for 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever, and I'm playing covers all night, then yeah, I should be able to charge money for that. However, if I'm creating music, writing original material and going to perform it somewhere, I think that you have to create a demand first before you can start demanding that people pay you. And you see this a lot at like we have you have venues that do ticketed shows, and you have bars that pay you guarantees for for 3 hours a time, and then once whatever, those ticketed places can start to pay you guarantees once you can command blah blah, all that fun stuff, right? But all too often you see musicians coming in saying, well, I don't want to play a free show, or I don't want to play for a place that's not going to guarantee me something. It's like, okay, but if you're writing new material, you haven't necessarily shown anybody that you've created. Just because you've created something, that doesn't mean that there's a demand for it. There's a demand for art, generally speaking, but not necessarily your art. So until you can like show that you've earned a bit of the market share there, or create a demand for the product that you've created, I don't believe that you're necessarily entitled to compensation to play it. If I'm going to go and play Tom Petty at a bar for 3 hours, that's fine. Market tested and approved material right there. We know it works. You can play it adequately. Go and get your guaranteed rate to go, to be a jukebox all night. Fine. Original material, I think it's the same thing as any other invention out there. You got to go out there. You got to do trade shows for free. You got to spend money. You got to show people that it's worth it, and that it's and create that demand for it, and then you can start to talk about compensation.
I can partially agree with that. I think I think anyone that would, especially at a lower level, would not play at a place because they're not getting a guarantee. I think that's just ego talking kind of thing. Because I'm assuming they're getting paid something. Like, is it a portion of tickets? Because in that point, I think that's very fair. Like, you are earning as much as you are, within a proportion of what you're drawing.
Yeah.
So it's like that. That's right. Reasonable. Anyone that's refusing to take that, and doesn't want to play, I think is, overselling themselves.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm not making an argument that if you sell out a show that you're not entitled to compensation. What I'm saying is that if you book a room, right, for your band, and then you got 3 other bands on the bill or something, and the deal that you've worked out is some kind of like 80-20 deal or whatever, however it works, and nobody shows up, okay, just you could be the best band in the world. If nobody cares, then you're not entitled to be compensated for the fact that you've been practicing in your own time. Like,
That's,
you know what I mean?
I think that's valid, but I also think that there's a little bit of responsibility on the venue itself, whoever's doing that booking, because I think if, even if it's like, I want to play a show here, and then they agree yes to do it, like, and then absolutely nobody shows up and the bar doesn't make any money, I think that's also a lack of effort on their part. Because essentially you're hiring, like, if you think about it as less of like, you're a contractor essentially, right? Like, if you think about it in that kind of term, and a contractor shows up and like they still do good work, but nobody shows up, like, you know what I mean? I don't think that's,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the responsibility is, a lot of the responsibility ought to be on a venue, and how they can get away with that is, the community trusts their curation. And so even if you don't know about this band, you're like, oh, you know what? Rockwood's always going to have a great, a bunch of bands coming in. I'm just going to go check it out and be there. And also my background was so many door split gigs. Now we don't really do that unless we're having some sort of guarantee and stuff. But generally speaking, so many times, and you get paid a lot of different ways.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, totally.
But I will say this, and you came up with another just thought. Is it, now you said you were talking about the venue's responsibility. Is it society's responsibility to support creativity?
So yes, but that
not anybody's.
Well, the thing is that society has a lot of responsibilities that they negate, just that we negate collectively, right? Like eating healthy is a good responsibility as well. So we're not like, there's I mean, it's so layered.
Housing, healthcare, child, whatever, everything.
Yeah, education, like all of it. There's so much that society collectively is responsible for, I think. However, it's not so when society doesn't show up for what we consider to be a luxury commodity like the arts, then we can't really be super upset about that. How?
But why do we consider it a luxury commodity?
Because it's,
is that we were told that, or is because we just established a minute ago that this is as essential as housing, healthcare, food. Why is this a luxury now? How come that's a luxury? I mean, I'm asking that not rhetorically. I'm actually curious why, myself included, we always think this way.
Right.
Like, oh, it's this kind of like other type of, it operates separate from the needs of society. But we saw it, man. We saw it. Like, it was tangible.
Yeah.
We needed this.
Totally.
So I think we need to shift the mindset that it is a luxury, because somehow it got conned onto us that it is.
Right.
I mean, like it.
Well, it's our entire education system, right? If you think about it, like look at what we cut the arts in public school education instantly, and then it's about math and science, and like, these are physical education, which also gets cut a lot of the time too. It's this social engineering of group thinking of like, well, it's math or science, choose one, and that's what you do, and it's all about like producing people that are going to think mechanically and in very certain terms about A, B, C, and here's input and here's output, and there's little room for creativity in that vein. And we all know that creativity inspires dissent and many other things, which is questioning all that, which is contrary to what whatever, call me conspiratorial, the powers that be would like the majority of their society to be made up of. That being said,
you don't want a well-functioning, well-oiled machine society doesn't want like an independent populace, right? You don't want like all these people to be like, I'll do this thing. You want it to be some sort of falling in line, for better or for worse.
Right, and maybe there is something to be said about the creatives fighting that kind of dichotomy, right? Because ultimately, creation is life, and life only is only born out of some kind of friction or struggle. So it's like maybe there's something poetic about society fighting the creative mind by cutting funding and other resources to help prop that kind of thinking up. So if we fight that battle and can still succeed being creative, then that's amazing. That being said, there's a lot of people that will never be able to fully indulge their propensity to be creative because it's shut down and they're told that this is the way to go. And, you know, who knows what kind of contribution to society you're negating by not.
How many Beatles, how many Dylans, how many Hendrixes, how many, you know, Shostakoviches did we lose from stifling their creativity and their progress in that? I bet you it's in the tens of thousands, tens of millions.
Yeah, man, totally. And, you know, but maybe there's a case to be made for scarcity and why we value, you know, such great art, because it is, you know, harder to come by when you see it at those levels. But I don't know, it's all very complicated on that end. But, you know,
I like the question.
Yeah, right. It's like, so I don't know. But ultimately, what I think, you know, back to the original point, I think that, you know, art, like any other commodity out there, whether it's luxury or otherwise, I still think that, you know, musicians have an entitlement problem sometimes because they think that they're good, or they've been screwed over by people in the past, or they have no experience at all. They think that, you know, if I'm writing music, then I'm entitled to compensation to performing it. You know, venues have rental rates for their rooms when you're talking about ticketed shows and stuff. So, you know, if they're not making any money on that, then they're assuming the same risk that you are. You know, they're losing money on the bar, they're losing money on their room for the night because they could have potentially booked a sold out show, you know, or at least a room that was halfway full with a more reputable band, but they gave you the night, whatever it might be. Who cares? Just the point being is that we're all, you know, on the creative side of it, we're all trying to figure out how to make money here. So it's like, you know, you don't get, just because you're a musician and you put in the work on the back end doesn't mean that that's what you get paid for. Like, you still have to do the work on the front end, like venues do when they're building out a venue. It's all that shit that goes into it that they're not getting, you know, they're spending whatever. It's, you get what I'm trying to say, right? It's like
Absolutely. I mean, it's all involved. It's all involved in the business. And so you can't just be only sitting in your room and writing these songs. I mean, you might have been able to get away with that however many decades or 100 years back, but like at this point, you know, there's so much of the business that has nothing to do with the art. I mean, there'll be whole, you know, months where I do way more computer work, years, way more computer work than I do work on my instrument. No question.
Marketing, promo, whatever. You know, you've released several records. You're working with a label, so it's like, you know,
emails, this, tours, that. You know,
yeah, all that shit, man, all that shit. It's just, you know, it's all part
just
of it.
as important.
100%. Max, thank you so much for being with us, man. This is
super fun.
It was a great time. Yeah,
really a great conversation. Again, I'm stoked for the new record and everything you got going on, man. Really keep paving the way and keep being an inspiration. I think this world needs it right now, and appreciate your contribution.
No, it's an honor. I hope I could offer some sort of something to the world.
100%, man. Well, good luck with everything, man. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Definitely.
All right, man.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a good one.